Hi, so this is another interview with Tim Freke on his, well, around his book Soul Story. So I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, so
here we are again.
here we are again. I think I wanted to start with something kind of just on a psychological level, because I was curious that you say you kind of, I've left aside like 34 books you've written to kind of sort of change direction with this new spirituality, and that's actually massive, and it's never really been acknowledged. And I'm sort of curious how it's changed you, how you felt doing that, and how difficult it was. And I was sort of reminded of, when Jung broke away from Freud, and he kind of went to bits, didn't he? That sort of breakdown, lots of visions, and ended up kind of making sandcastles, I think. It's sort of his way of grounding himself, was these intricate sandcastles. But yeah, I mean, what came afterwards was very, very interesting. But I was just wondering what your process was.
Oh, so a lot easier than that. No sandcastles.
No sandcastles. Okay.
How's it been? It was paradoxical, I would say, Dawn. Mm-hmm. That on the one hand, what carried me through was it was very exciting.
Right.
Because there's something about when I see I've been wrong that opens up a new possibility, and therefore I feel like I'm seeing more, my experience goes deeper. So all of that is like, yeah, I love it, that's why I do it. Uh-huh. And I mean, I'm only writing books so that I have the privilege of being able to give my time to contemplating what this is. Uh-huh. So I'm doing it for this reason. So it was a big jump, and then more jumps since Soul Story as well. And so that was a good side. The other side, yeah, I mean, I suppose I had kind of, not particularly grandiose fantasies, but fantasies that I could leave something of value in the world. Uh-huh. And so it was kind of ironic that now I was looking back going, oh yeah, those things which I'd hoped would just stand on their own, I still think they're good books, and I think they're benign. I think, people that read them benefit from reading them. But now I think there's 2 or 3 key ideas which I got wrong. Uh-huh. And then there's the knock-on of that also, that then a whole load of people decided that that they didn't want anything to do. So my reach as an author and as someone who runs events probably decreased quite considerably. Uh-huh. And then new people who were more attracted to that, who were like, oh, this guy's changed his mind, that's interesting. And actually those are the people I'm looking for. I want to connect with those people who are able to doubt their ideas and find better ones. So overall it's been great, but there's been a price. Okay,
all right. Because there's something as well in non-dual circles. There's a lot of people who wake up and say that they don't have passion. Passion is no longer something they experience. They're just more, there's no attachment to anything. It's almost like passion or interest is shunned almost.
Yes.
I've had clients who've I've had to work through that with them. Like, yeah. I've got one client who's very, very passionate, awake, and kind of like feeling slightly uncomfortable. Am I awake because I'm passionate? And
I love passion. Come across,
yeah.
I feel that kind of, if you mean by passion an involvement with life and an enthusiasm for being alive and how strange it is and the journey and with all of its, it's hard, but God, I love it so much. And when new things arrive, I mean at the moment my life is crazy, Dawn. I come out here where we are every day, pretty much,
right,
or go walking as well. But I'm working through how to articulate this new philosophy, and I can't begin to tell people who don't do it how hard that is. It's like doing weights all day, but with your mind. And it is very exciting, and then it's really frustrating because I can't find how to do it, or either the ideas themselves aren't clear, or the ideas feel clear, but I can't say them easily enough. And I really want to be able to articulate things so that people understand them. And that takes me an enormous amount of time. And then when I arrive, usually it's something I can just say, and I'm still working on that. So, but it's really hard. And why am I doing it? I mean, I don't know. I have a passion for it. It feels that this thing we're in matters, and this is what Tim does. This is my contribution towards what this is. And I love that.
Yeah, okay. It's just, I think, because a lot of non-dual speakers, say that there's so much that's all the metaphysical stuff, it's unknowable, therefore it's of no interest to them. So,
but that's a kind of sleight of hand, because they have a metaphysics or an ontology. They have a set of philosophical ideas. That's one of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
That is a philosophical idea, that you can know things non-conceptually. I don't think that's true. I think they're just a bit naive.
Okay.
Around psychological processes and how we experience things. So they've picked up ideas from very old traditions, often with a medieval psychology, often, and they've just taken it as if it's just true. I mean, I get comments all the time. We'll have them for this video, I suspect, in which people lecture me, really, about what really is the truth.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And ironically, some of it could be directly from my old books, as if I have no idea about any of this. Because if you have got the truth, there are certain things you do and certain things you believe, and so, and I think all of that is just nonsense. And to me, it's like weird that very idea itself is the first mistake.
Right.
That you can know things without ideas is wrong, and that therefore to go, look, oh well, it's just a mystery. I get it that it is a mystery, but it's a mystery which human beings have worked really hard to understand some part of, and because they have, we've got cameras and internet and spaceships and everything.
Because you also mentioned that idea, with these emergent experiences, that somehow in the experience itself, you're supposed to be able to understand it through the experience, but you're saying it's kind of ideated. It's like they're kind of lifting old ideas and sort of explaining it in terms of like Advaita Vedanta or...
So there's two things here, I think, and this is kind of new for me as well. This is all relatively. What I'm suggesting is that everything, not just us, but everything is a system in relationship with the whole, and everything is able to read its ecology, if you like, whatever is around it, according to its nature. Whether you're talking about something physical or something biological, or like us, psychobiological. And we read this obviously with our senses, like I'm reading the vibration of light and the vibration of sound, but to make sense of my senses, I have all of these ideas. So as a psychobiological entity, every experience I have, I'm ideating, which means I'm categorizing it with ideas. All of this is happening unconsciously.
Right, okay.
I can reflect on it consciously and change it to some degree. That's what philosophy is.
Yeah.
But vast majority, every single thing I'm going, it's this, not this, it's this, not this, it's this, not this, and putting it into meaningful narratives. So if I have an experience of oneness, let's say, the fact that I can discriminate the experience of oneness from an experience which isn't oneness means I'm ideating it.
Okay.
Because otherwise I couldn't discriminate the two. So all of those mystical experiences are they're being ideated on a higher level. That you're able to perceive, and what you're doing is you're perceiving something very deep about the nature of reality. I'm not taking any of that away. I'm not saying it's being made up or any of that. But you are ideating. And you may have picked that up from other people and books, or you may have just stumbled on it, or there may be other reasons why it happened. And then later you've come to understand it consciously with ideas.
Right.
But I think the common idea that somehow the mind is in the way comes from a confusion between ideating and what I think of as monologuing, thinking, in that sense. So the word thinking is ambiguous. It means two things, and we need to separate the two things that it means. One thing it means sometimes is ideating, how you actually categorize everything, mainly unconscious. And then there's talking to yourself.
Okay, right.
Yeah, imagining talking. So the same as what we're doing, but just to yourself.
Yeah, okay.
So let's call this is dialoguing, let's call that monologuing. And that can get in the way. Because if you're paying that attention, you're not paying anything else attention.
Yeah, okay.
But that's not the same as ideating.
Yeah, okay.
Everything must be ideated.
Right, okay. And I suppose, sort of thinking of, another thing you tackle is the idea that there is no self, no me. And I think, I get the sense you described it as kind of a dissociation. Would you see it as disassociation, or...
Yeah, I mean, after our last conversation, because this is all changing all the time for me. I thought about that. I became more and more. The question I kept on asking myself was, what is this I which is being denied? What does it even mean? The I that's being denied, and of course, if you go back to the Eastern traditions where this is mainly arisen from, you've got the two great camps in, let's say, types of Hinduism and types of Buddhism, where you've got an idea in Hinduism that there is an eternal I. It's like you're the Atman. It's an eternal I. It's like a spark of the divine, and it's what you are, and it incarnates and reincarnates, and still it gets free. And then in Buddhism, you've got the idea that there is no I.
Right.
There's no it's an Atman. It's no self, but there's still something which is reincarnating and going through the whole journey and all the rest of it. And so my sense is, if people are talking about this, if they're denying the existence of this eternal spark of something, I agree with that. I don't think that I exists. I don't even know what it would mean anymore. And I'm much closer in that sense to the Buddhist idea.
Right.
That, look, but I still think, but I have an identity. I'm Tim.
Yeah.
And Tim has arisen from and is part of the oneness of being. And he's a particular psychobiological system. He's the one relating to itself, and in this form. And he has choice, and he is evolving, and he's learning, and he's meeting you, and exists on the level of psyche or soul. So there's identity there, and that identity matters and shouldn't be diminished.
Yeah. Okay. Would you say, I mean, things like sense of location, like being absent, is there anything in that you identify? Do you have an experience of that, or, because that's another thing?
Yes, I can't remember exactly what we talked about last time, but I think we might have touched on this. One of the key changes for me, perhaps the key change, recently has been a kind of theory of consciousness.
Right.
So in Advaita, the word consciousness is such a tricky word. It was originally, the English word, as far as I know, was coined by John Locke, the philosopher, to refer to the psyche, the imagination.
Right.
That was consciousness. And then it got widened, and then it meant anything you're conscious of. So the conscious senses and the conscious imagination. And then it got used as a translation for various Eastern texts, in which now consciousness becomes not the experiences that are conscious, but the presence of some mysterious thing, which is the experiencer.
Yeah.
Which I don't think exists. So I did, but I don't know. The way it looks to me is we are conscious that as I said, I'm a system, a psychobiological system. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, just in the way that everything is kind of a system on different levels. I'm in relationship to the universe, like you. And the way that I relate to it through the senses and through the psyche, I can focus on what is important and process that in high definition.
Yeah.
And that's what I think consciousness is, or conscious experience is that which I focus on in high definition, whether it's outside me or inside me. Once you get that, and everything else is being processed unconsciously, most things are being conscious or unconsciously, then I think what happens with these mystical states, where people experience the timelessness and things like that, is that your attention isn't on what changes. So if you, especially in deep meditation, or if you take your attention right away from the things you normally pay attention to, you can experience this timeless emptiness.
Yeah.
But time hasn't stopped, and you're still there. Tim is experiencing it. Tim is sitting there doing his thing, but he's not paying attention to Tim.
Yeah, okay.
And so
well, then, yeah.
I don't experience Tim. It's like Tim's not there. But then when I bring my attention back to Tim, there he is, and he's been doing it for half an hour.
Okay.
And so I think that's what creates these. And then what happens is then people go, no, I actually didn't exist.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which is a bit like going to sleep at night and saying, I had a dream that I was in Egypt and my room just didn't exist. No, really, it didn't. And you go, no, it did. You just weren't aware of it.
Yeah.
Because you were sleeping.
But, so you talk about emergent experience. What about, the abiding state of awakening, say, like, that it's always experienced? Unconditional love is, once it's realised, it's always there, and...
So I've been hanging around this for quite a few decades.
Yeah.
You've been too.
Yeah.
Have you met anyone like that?
I mean, I'm willing to sort of...
I met some very nice people.
Well, people can seem nice. I mean, you don't know, but I mean, I'm just wondering whether you can experience unconditional love yet at heartbeat. I mean, a narcissist, presumably, if they wake up, could experience that, but perhaps when they're triggered, they're just in absolute hate. I mean, I don't know, but it's hard to appearances
to
are so
me,
deceptive.
once you get behind the scenes and either know someone personally or know somebody who knows someone personally, all of these people turn out to be human.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, yeah.
The ones that work hardest to appear not human are the ones that seem to then have the big thing, the dark thing happen around them.
Yeah.
And there's lots of darkness around people like that in spirituality. So I think it's all the product of a bad idea. Mm-hmm. I think there's 3 bad ideas in Hinduism which we've come across here and taken us on. Mm-hmm. And they work together. The one bad idea is the idea of enlightenment. Mm-hmm. The second bad idea is the idea of the ego. And the third bad idea is the idea of the guru. And they work together in Hindu philosophy in a potentially a pernicious way. Not always, but potentially. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is there's an idea of an absolute end to the journey, the spiritual journey, which is enlightenment, permanent. And the only reason it's permanent is because it's the absence of self.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a place that you could get, which is you're either there or you're not. Uh-huh. There's a thing in you, yourself, your ego, which is trying to stop you.
Right.
And there's this person who has achieved it, and the only person that can help you because you're at war with yourself, which invests this person with absolute power. I think all 3 things are wrong. There is no enlightenment. Actually, there's a continuation of evolution. There's no end. Because the journey is not about getting rid of the self. It's about the evolution of the self onto higher levels. So the ego is not the problem. It's just ambiguous. Bits of it stand in the way. Bits of it are benign. You need to evolve it. And the guru figure has to be someone who encourages that. Mm-hmm. Not who stands in any sort of absolute authority, because their job, of a teacher of any sort, is to help the person who they're teaching just to not need them, to actually get to the point where they're going, yeah, this is really happening. So that little vortex, I think, is negative.
Okay, so there's no permanent shift on any level. I mean, do you notice differences?
No, there are permanent shifts, isn't there? And that's the whole. But there are the whole way through. It's like there was a time when I couldn't walk. Now generally I can, or there's sometimes I fall over.
Yeah. Okay.
There was a time when I couldn't do lots of things.
Yeah.
And generally now I can. Talking and all sorts, playing instruments and. So you reach a place and you can generally do it. Mm. And I think that's like that with awakening, as it were, these more emergent states. It astonishes me how deeply I can go when I focus in meditation, say now, compared to as I was when I was in my 20s. Uh-huh. It's like, wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And that's just because I've done it a lot. That's all. There's nothing mysterious about it. It's like I did it a lot. I've got better at it. And Does that mean that I'm always in some exalted state? Goodness gracious me, no. But more so. And then new things open up. I think the thing, I don't know if this works for you in your experience, but that big love, that enormous love, I don't think I could function in that all the time. We just had a retreat last weekend. Everyone was so, I mean, the love was just outrageous. But A, it was exhausting, and B, I couldn't look at my gas bill feeling that. It was like gas bill. It's like, see my accountant, or it's like, So that comes and goes, and I think it's right that it comes and goes, depending on where I'm focusing. But there is something which has just increased and increased and increased, and I think my term for that is a universal benevolence. There's a wishing well to everyone and everything, and that has steadily increased. So even when I'm like someone cuts me off on the road, and I might just think, oh, what the hell, I still wish them well. It's just increased and increased. So that's the permanent bit for me. Okay.
Yeah, because I wondered about that as well, because there's something about the description of non-duality, description becomes prescription. People tend to imitate those qualities. And it's almost like the speakers themselves get conditioned by it, I think. And I don't see how that's escapable, but I was thinking also...
It's quite funny.
I've had to free myself from certain things, and but then any spiritual ideas also of benevolence, because I was sort of thinking there are certain, I like what Alice Miller says, love what is loving and hate what is hateful.
Who said that?
Alice Miller. I just thought it's a good quote, because it's very easy to get out of touch with your real feeling, and somebody will hear benevolence and they'll think, oh, I hate this person, but I also feel, you can imitate that too. I mean, it's just because I don't know if I do feel benevolent when certain people, when I think certain situations I think about, maybe, but maybe you do have that, and that's your quality. But I kind of know if.
See, I think that there is something. Maybe it's the wrong word for you, but there is. I would say, for me on my journey, there is something which holds within it that, I can still be angry. Here's an analogy which is for me is what I found being a parent.
Uh-huh.
It's like, as a parent, I could be angry,
mm-hmm.
I could punish,
yeah.
I could do all sorts, but I never stopped loving.
Okay, all right, okay.
Even though I was those things.
Yeah.
And there's a benevolence or a lovingness or a wishing well that is there, as well as feeling like, oh, you just treated me really badly and I'm not going to let that go, or whatever needs to be said, or which would encourage somebody who's being abused to step away and not just put up with it, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But there is still something which comes, there's something which builds from the recognition of our oneness. It's kind of, there's a commonality which goes very deep.
Do you, even if the unconditional love isn't experienced as being there all the time, do you experience something like the intimacy with the life? Because for me, there's an experience that a stranger isn't really a stranger. Yeah. Even if I'm anxious, there's still, it doesn't negate that somehow. It's still there. Yes,
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I'd call it an intimacy, although I do know, I like that word, and I do get that a lot. Well, I don't know what the right word would be for it. There is I think of it as just, I love life. I just, even when it's shit, and even when I'm not so great, and all sorts happens, even then,
mm-hmm.
And that, again, just to use a common human analogy, this is one I used in a much earlier book, in Mystery Experience. It felt like, it really is like a love affair, whereby sometimes I want to shout at life and go, how dare you do that to me?
Uh-huh.
But I still love her. I still love life.
Even
when I'm shouting, how dare you do that to me?
Yeah.
And so even there's a toing and froing with the whole relationship I have with existence, but it's underlying it. There's a kind of, even when it's boring, it's kind of, I love it still.
Okay. So it can, because boredom's another thing that doesn't happen after awakening, according to, I think I've said that as well, and, you know, non-dual speakers talk about, you know, boredom, because time doesn't exist, boredom isn't there. I mean, there is something I experience in a queue, so unless I'm in a hurry, of sort of sinking more into absorption states. So,
definitely, you can do that, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's, but all of this range of human experience is still there, I think. And I don't know, there feels like there's an awful lot of pretense, Dawn. Don't you feel that now?
Yeah, I know. I'm starting to question, my own experience of this and things I've said. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's good fun, but it's also quite scary, like, as well. But it's...
Yeah,
it's quite liberating.
but you know, there is these spiritual states, emergent, they're for real. They're really beautiful and really interesting, and you can have them more, and people are having them much more quickly. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was starting off, it was really quite rare to get a big blast of something really like, whoa. But now I see people having them a lot, and when people come to me, everybody has them, and it's because I think we are evolving. I mean, so in that way, we don't just move up and become more steady on a different level ourselves. I think collectively we're doing that, and that's good.
Do you think you're... Because I get the impression you're quite an optimistic...
I am. horribly optimistic. But that comes from the experience, though. Do you have that? I mean...
Yeah, I think I am by nature anyway. Like, I can't get rid of that. And I know sometimes that's kind of unrealistic.
Okay, so I don't know... Am I optimistic? Which I am. I'm really optimistic. I don't know. Am I optimistic because I'm just an optimistic type of guy and that's just my nature? Or because I can't tell, because the awakening, you know, first started for me when I was 12, so it's very young, and it's been happening on and off all my life. And there's something about stepping into that connection with something bigger than myself. Mm-hmm. So beautiful, that beautiful presence, which just makes me feel optimistic. I just think it's okay. But you know, there's something so good here that I feel optimistic.
But it's like, I mean, you almost sort of say that it kind of runs through your philosophy in a way, like it.
Yeah, it does.
And which I kind of like, but it, you know, like, so that, I mean.
But that's not an accident. The reason it runs through the philosophy is because I'm trying to make sense of, in this world which is so full of suffering, in this world which is so full of banality, and seems to have happened through lots of random evolution, how can it be that I'm experiencing this incredibly beautiful, benign presence? How can that happen? So I'm trying to answer that. I'm trying to go, how can I experience life as, at the one hand, utterly beautiful, and I feel positive about it, and also terrible and cruel, and so how can that work together? And my philosophy is an attempt to answer that. Okay,
so that whole thing of putting God at the end.
Exactly, is the way of answering it. One of the ways that I do that.
How did you come up? I mean, was there a sort of big bang moment you came up with that, or was it just, like you say, you're trying to make sense of the dinosaurs and shit like that? And,
it was a big bang moment in a way. I like that description because it's the opposite of the Big Bang, really, isn't it? But it was. It came from struggling with these things. And I think the idea which really led to Soul Story and then has gone even deeper since then was I'm experiencing a flow of change. Always.
Right.
And in that flow of change, there's development, there's evolution. The next thing builds on the previous thing. Maybe that's what reality is. Maybe reality is that emerging of novelty from the becoming. It's being this and it's becoming something else. It's being this, it's coming to be something else. In which case, and then we've got this lovely philosophy in science, understanding of the evolutionary universe. So is it possible that everything which has form of any type whatsoever is all part of one process of forming? And that felt such a beautiful and elegant idea, I wanted to follow it. And the more I followed it, the more it's made sense. So then you're left with, okay, so what is this experience I'm having of this benign presence, which gets called God?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it has form, because I'm experiencing something,
Mm-hmm.
therefore it must be part of that process, not outside the process.
Right.
And the process must start with the simplest things you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the big things that I've been exploring very recently is really going, okay, so when I say it's all one, the simplest thing, the place it starts, is with the number one.
Right.
Like, that's the ontological essence of this, is what we refer to with the number one. And I
Right.
think that's what people like Pythagoras want to. And it's from that beginning, the one as two, is going to come all this information. And then surely this experience I'm having, which feels so emergent, must be at the end of that, not at the beginning.
Okay.
And then suddenly I had a way of approaching the idea of God which made sense to me and didn't fall into the problem of evil. You know, why does a good God allow evil? And all of those problems.
Okay. And, so at death, trans life, dimension, whatever, none of that is lost. No memories, nothing is lost.
Well, the idea again with the becoming, the idea that there's this constant process of emergence of novelty.
Mm-hmm.
What goes with that for me is the past hasn't gone anywhere. The past is accumulating. It hasn't passed. So everything that's ever happened, our last conversation, is implicit in this one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Everything. Our first meeting in wherever it was, Italy, and you getting born. Oh, the evolution of the human race. Oh, the Big Bang. Everything.
Uh-huh.
So the universe is not just expanding in space or as space. It's expanding as information. And therefore my identity is as a process.
Uh-huh.
So my identity is my past. And I'm a relationship. That's what I am. I'm a relationship of a certain system, which maybe predates Tim, but let's say Tim, in relationship with the whole, with the universe. So I'm all of that. So here's me, everything I've ever experienced, everything, all that relationship, meeting you, which is another, everything you. And so that can't be lost, because it's what you are. What can change is what you're aware of. So I've forgotten most of it.
Right, okay.
But it's still there, because it's what I am. And then when you hear people describe their near-death experiences, which is always so moving, one of the very common things they report is, I saw everything. Everything was still there.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if memory is ever lost, or like.
I think we need
different question.
No. It's like with so many of these questions is about distinguishing different ideas.
Uh-huh.
So one idea is the past, and one is memory of the past.
Uh-huh.
So memory of the past seems to come and go.
Yeah.
And you can regain it, and you can lose it. Blah blah blah. You can have the effects on your brain which make it hard to do it, and so forth. But the thing you are remembering, the thing you're connecting to, is the past itself.
Uh-huh.
And I'm suggesting that's gone nowhere. So nothing's ever lost. Nothing. Because it's what makes you what you are. You may temporarily lose your memories of them, but what you are is still there.
Okay. Well, I mean, since everything you seem to have this idea almost of fairness that sort of flows through your philosophy as well, it seems.
Fairness?
Well, kind of fair. Except for, I was just wondering.
I like that idea, but is that true? I don't know.
Well, it's optimistic.
Optimistic.
Well, okay, but I was just sort of thinking, like, I mean, you haven't really gone into this. Maybe it's you're not that interested, but the whole thing of Bardo's, which, from my experiences of other dimensions, I just find it more and more convincing that there is something like that, and. The fact, so we've developed, we can reflect on our experience, is any of that useful in experience in Bordeaux states? Because it does seem to have this randomness factor of, you can, you would say it's karma, whether you end up in a hell state. I think you suggest it might be karma, like hell state, heaven state. I've experienced quite a few different ones. But
I'm quite nervous of the word karma because because of its associations. But
right.
But just in the very obvious sense for me, it's like your psyche is everything your psyche's experienced, your soul. So what you experience without the body will be in some way dependent on your psyche.
Right.
So it's like, just like when you dream at night, it will be dependent on your psyche. Except I think it looks like after death, it's on a very much more emergent and collective level.
Yeah.
Like you said, like the bardo. So you've got this kind of soulscapes which exist now, which you can move into.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So you've no reservations about death in that sense, personally, or maybe you don't want to talk about it?
I don't mind talking about it. Do I have any reservations about it? I don't. I prefer not to die for a while.
Okay.
As long as I can. I really like this.
Okay.
and it's so exciting at the moment because I feel like, I wish I was a lot younger. I suppose most people do, but because I feel like I'm really developing some very interesting ideas in my 60s, which means I haven't got very long to share them and not very long to hear what anyone makes of them. So, and it's taking me forever. So I wish I was younger. So I prefer not to die soon, but I'll die when I die. And I did, one of the things that I had big last week, I took a few days off really, because I like to feel like I'm ready to die. And I realised last week I didn't feel that. So I needed to stop and get ready to die. Not that I'm hoping to die, but I just want to...
Anything to that? Do you feel like it should be a sort of non-attachment to life, or
no,
none of that? Okay.
No, I'm dreadfully attached to
right,
and to
that's much
people and to everything. I'm really into just embracing our humanity. It's but it's paradoxical. So you can both love life and be ready to die, can't you?
Yeah. And if you've lived life fully, apparently it's easier to face death. According to Yalom studies,
I'm sure it is, and I've had such a lucky life. It's like, but I hope it goes on for as much as I can. It's and don't get me wrong. I mean, everything that I understand about the nature of existence is all provisional.
Yeah, no, I get. Yeah.
I mean, it's just the best I've got right now, and it opens up new experience. So I don't know, in some absolute sense, anything, let alone what's going to happen when I die. How could I? That's ridiculous. I think it's a misunderstanding of what we mean by words like know. I think we simply mean, when you say I know something, we just mean I have a high belief that this is probably right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's
Yeah. I think as well, like a lot of people talk about, after sort of seeing of unconditional love, that they experience personal love as impersonal.
Sounds awful.
It doesn't. It's not what you want, is it? Like, but I just wondered.
Yeah. So one of the big reasons that I love this new conception I have of God, or this benign presence, as something which is evolving from our. I think the idea is in Soul Story is, look, just as the cells in my body have got together to form Tim, the souls in a state of communion are forming a supersystem, something bigger, and that's what we experience as a supermind. So rather than the old idea you get in the Hermetica and lots of other texts that reality is arising within a great mind, it's the opposite. It's like a Copernican shift. What you thought was at the beginning it's the other way around. It's not arising within a great mind, it's arising as a great mind. That's the wisdom of the universe has evolved from wisdom that allows it to be molecules to wisdom that allows it to be God. And that is what's evolved through this 14 billion year process, and it's still evolving. Now, I love that for all sorts of reasons, but one of the big reasons is that for me, when I came across spirituality when I was young, the message I got was my human loves are in the way. They're kind of a joke. Okay. They're looking for love in the wrong places. Just stop that. Just go for God. Ideally be a monk. I almost did that twice. Etc., etc. What this says is no. The reason it feels so good when you fall in love when you're a teenager is because that communion, that's God. Yeah, that's a little drop of God there.
Yeah.
And when you love your baby, or you love your activity, or your best friend, or a view, or anything, you're entering into a communion experience. And for that little bit, there's that oneness. And that will get bigger. and as it gets bigger, and then when you hit the mystical experience of oneness, then it really becomes big. But it doesn't deny the love of your partner, the love of your child. It actually builds from it.
Okay.
And I think that's so much healthier and really endorses our human experience.
The communion of souls bit, I mean, I like the idea. I find it quite difficult. Well, obviously it's difficult to picture, isn't it? Because it's an idea, but so individual souls is...
I think we're entwined already. See, I think you and I were entwined because we had an experience together. Now, you're your past, I'm my past. You're in me, I'm in you. That's happened now. And a bit like you get with, with quantum particles, where you get this thing of entanglement, where a particle that's engaged with another particle will be entangled, even when they're on the other side of the universe.
Right.
And what you do, they're entangled now. And it feels like the same with psyche. The psyche is non-spatial, isn't it? You know, it's like we're in it. We're both experiencing the psyche. Where is it?
Yeah,
it's not in space, is it? It's not in space. A whole different dimension. So I think there's a web of or an ecology, if you like, or an ecosystem of psyche, just like there is in biology, and that ecosystem is what will form collectives, which we experience now. Like you have a collective of your friends.
Yeah.
And they're your friends because there's something where you resonate together and you're connected. And if you're really connected, if something bad happens, you might feel it, or or all of that. And so but if that goes to another level, that's where there's an actual communion starts taking place.
But there's something in that, like God. Is there any sense of like? Then I think of an entity. Do you know? I think of an entity God, like. So with certain kind of agency.
Honestly, I feel like, how would I know? It's like like the cell in my finger knowing what it's like to be Tim.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
But if I let myself just fantasize.
Yeah.
My sense is yes, that all of these, that it's a super soul or a super mind or a super psyche, that all of or think of it like a. I don't know. This is only a silly analogy, but if you think about a computer system, well, think of the internet,
right?
Where you bring together all of these disparate systems, and suddenly you've got this massive system. Well, imagine that, except in this case, it's a conscious entity made of souls.
Okay, and because I don't know how you put it now, but it can sometimes that domain can influence this domain, like
I think so.
Yeah, which seems. Yeah, makes sense.
And I think it does it through this idea. Another idea for me, when I've been trying to say in Soulstra, I was trying to understand life as I experience it. So I experience life as mechanical, predictable. I take something, I drop it, it falls, etc. But I also experience it as magical, and really weird stuff happens quite a bit. Sometimes so weird you can't miss it. And that's true not just for me, it's true for all of my close friends.
Right.
And has been for decades.
Okay.
And if I said to them, was Jung right about synchronicity, for example? It happens to Carl Jung, he's a smart guy. And they would have just gone, yeah, of course it does. Now, how can that be true? How can it... The reason I ended up with this idea that life is like a dream was because of all of that.
Right.
So, because that kind of goes, that's possible because it's dreamlike. What I've come to now is that dreamlike nature has emerged. So when the psyche emerges, that is dreaming, literally. It's a place of meaning. It's a place of narrative. It's stories. It's where the story of Tim meets the story of Dawn, and we dream in stories and all of that. If you drop the idea that is so popular in science, and I think it's a bad idea, that reality is only the most basic thing, and all of the causality goes upwards. I think it's a crazy idea, but it's very popular. And if you replace that and say, no, reality is the whole spectrum of emergence. It is physics and quantum physics, but it's also biology, and it's also psyche, and it's also got all of it. And all of those levels influence each other. So my body can influence my psyche, but my psyche can influence my body, and it's going to do it now. I'm going to lift my hand. There you go. Yeah. My psyche just did magic. Then it's possible that whole narrative domain is affecting what happens on the lower levels. And what that means is, to put it, I quite like seeing it like this, that literally, in a sense, existence has evolved into a story. And that the story level is what's creating all of that synchronous magic that makes it feel dreamlike. And I think that happens in quite a non-moral way. I don't think it's. I think it can be just sometimes crazy. It just happens. It's a natural part of the world. It doesn't. Sometimes it means something. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just funny.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it can happen when people are being really beautiful and good. But I think it can happen in cults a lot. I think it probably happened around Hitler. It's just a natural thing that story breaks out in this narrative way. But that benign, divine mystery, I think, has an effect on that ability for narrative to influence you, and I think that's what you experience as grace. So when you have that thing and you go, oh, this magic is not just any magic. This is magic which is coming from a very emergent place. This is coming from God, and that's what we experience as that hand of grace coming in and moving us towards something better, supporting us.
So maybe that would explain, like you mentioned before, the power of prayer or intention, because it is uncanny, like when in a certain emotional state, to ask for something or like help or something, it seems to be answered quite a lot, I find, but it's got to be a kind of real, I don't know, kind of authentic feeling somehow. I mean,
I think so. I think it can be amazing how it responds. But my sense, I had a big God experience. It must be 2 years ago now, and it's hung around for a long time. It was really big for me. And after that, my sense was that whatever it is, didn't need asking. It was completely rooting for me and you all the time. It was never a moment where it wasn't. And when I tuned into it, it was something was just absolutely there for me, completely doing its best to move the Tim story in the best direction, and I just needed to cooperate with it.
Was there something different about that then to a oneness experience that was more
about
God?
the thing, the experience itself, which was before it, was becoming, for not that long, I don't know, 20 minutes or something, just completely immersed in light, and light's the best word I can find, and I'd not had that before. Just nothing but light, and that blew me away.
Was it like, I mean, can you describe the light? Was it like white light? Was it dark light? Was there any? Yeah,
so it was the easiest. All I can tell you is what I wrote down afterwards, which was like being in a white room with no walls.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Right. Okay.
So like that sense, just like, and incredibly moving. And then as it faded, a lot of my dead friends and relatives felt like they were with me.
Okay, so it was like it had aspects of an NDE.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I didn't at the time. I didn't think of it like that, but it did have aspects of it, And I certainly felt like I've always resonated with the love light idea in the NDE because it comes. Or whilst I'd never experienced that intensity, I recognise in what people say the big love that I do experience.
Okay.
So I thought, I know that. And then there was that was my. Well, I wasn't dying or anything, but.
Well, what were you doing at the time? Like, were you meditating? Were you just walking around? What?
I was with some very special friends, and there we were.
Oh, so it was in a good circumstances. You were feeling actually quite good, and then boom.
Yeah.
Was it emotional afterwards, or
a
lot of tears, stuff like that? Or?
Not tears, but a lot of emotion, and it just hung around for a long time because it was on Remembrance Day, funnily enough, on the 11th of November.
Right, okay. Nice. Any phenomenon afterwards? Like,
That sort of meaning.
I'm just wondering if there's any similarity there, like to an NDU, any psychic phenomenon following that, or not? Just
Good question. I don't think so. Not that I can remember. The biggest thing I remember, because I remember it was on the door to my office that we're in, was just finding myself praying, which is not something I do a great deal. In that way, that kind of. I think it was like a petitionary prayer of "Don't let me lose this," like that sort of prayer.
okay.
And that's when I just got so strongly that this thing, this presence that I've been having this relationship with since I was so young, there's no question of it not being there. It was just there. And that optimism again, that hope, it's just completely there. And I really got that sense that one of the traditional images is that it's a parent. And obviously that's a human image that you've projected on it, but I kind of got why, because it felt like it felt reminiscent in some way of how I feel sometimes as a parent, which is I'm completely there for my kids. I can't live their life for them, I can't make everything perfect, the world is the way it is, but anything I could do, I would. And it felt like that. It felt like, but on a higher level, just like it's not running the world, it can't make my life, I still have to live my life. But it's absolutely there for me and with me, and that's the thing I really want to share with people, because I don't know how people who don't have that, I admire them how they get through, because I think I'd find life really hard without it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, the awakening.
Yeah.
It's no way.
Yeah.
But yeah, because life's tough anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think for me, I can remember when I went to India and saw Ramesh Balsekar. Strange story, and I ended up sitting in his front room by accident. Before really anyone had really heard of him over here much. And that was a big thing for me. But I'd already run away twice to a friary, and I had a mentor who became a friend who ran the friary, older man. And I would talk to him enthusiastically about Advaita Vedanta. And he would gently point me back to the personal all the time.
Okay.
And I was just like, he just doesn't get it. But what actually has happened for me is I've gone, oh no, having been through that, I've come back to the personal. So I have a personal relationship with something greater than me. And not because it's a person, but because I'm a person.
All right, okay. That explains a lot, because it's a taboo against that as well, isn't there, in the non-dual community?
Yes. But in the same way as in the great traditions, in Hinduism, for all of them, one way or another, you get this common idea of there is something, Brahman, God, whatever, but you're not separate from it.
Yeah.
And the idea there is you're not separate because you're like a spark from it that's got lost and needs to return. And in this Copernicus shift that I'm suggesting, it's still true. It's just that it's not that you're a spark from it that's got lost and is coming back. It's that it is the merging of all of these. I don't know, imagine it like neurons in a superbrain. It's like each soul is a neuron in a superbrain. So you are it. You are part of it.
Yeah,
it doesn't exist separate from you, but not because you've fallen from it, but because it is the communion and the coming together of all of these different souls, which we get to go in and out of. There was a lovely image that a woman shared with me at one point from her NDE. And she described seeing the light and then seeing sparks coming into it and falling away and coming into it and falling away.
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
And to me it was like, yeah, that's it. But not, it's just the light and then it's all falling away. But actually, no, we reach into it, we're part of it, and then we're not, and then we are, and we're coming into and out of communion with it. But all of the communion that is existing, it now has its own... it exists in itself, and it's there for us.
But then, you say that the soul, imagine the soul can survive only so long in this trans life dimension or whatever. So it has to come back somehow.
I've been thinking about this.
Have you?
Today, I was
Okay.
working on this today.
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't know. But my sense is, look, the thing I'm sharing really, because it's an evolutionary picture, Dawn, as you know,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say is, look, I'm exploring the idea that rather than the soul pre-existing and falling into the body, that it's the other way around. That the psyche or the soul has evolved from the biological level and has learnt how to exist without the body.
Right.
And there's a whole load of other things I can share why I think that's possible. But, you know, the first thing I feel with that is like you know, when people go, really? And you go, well, look, how likely is it that human beings could evolve from fish? But they have. So it's not that unlikely, is it?
Yeah.
or how likely is it that you could evolve from hydrogen, but you have?
Yeah.
So it's not that unlikely. It's certainly worth consideration. So what I'm suggesting is that in the evolutionary process, systems find solutions to problems, like a learning AI.
Right, okay.
They're looking for solutions, and they do, you know, more armour, sharper claws, faster legs, whatever it is, which will help it find its niche. And that therefore the psyche has been looking for how to survive, because that's the major impetus on every biological system, is to survive. And it has learnt how to survive without the body. My guess is that reincarnation or transmigration, whatever you want to call it, has also arisen for an evolutionary reason. That the soul is unable to just keep itself on that level and need to sustain itself, needs to come back into a symbiotic relationship with an arising new psychobiological system. And that's the area I'm exploring. It's like what that both the arising of reincarnation and the rising of the afterlife experiences are both evolutionary solutions to evolutionary problems.
Okay.
Like everything else is.
Yeah, it was just crossing my mind if that was the case, and soul reincarnates. It's kind of like from scratch then, or do you think that some?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so what they orientate you, come back, they'll be with your philosophical mind and kind of.
So the word I came up with to try and get this, see, a lot of these words are loaded, so they cause a whole load of problems. And reincarnation is probably, for me, the most loaded.
Right.
Partly because there's so much nonsense around it. You know, it's like I've met so many Mary Magdalenes and Cleopatras and, you know, Napoleons and, you know, all that.
Yeah.
So you know, there's part of me that's like, and I haven't had a lot of experiences around it, so it's not like I have a personal skin in the game. But what I call psychosymbiosis, that once you get the idea that, look, everything is informational systems on different levels of emergence, then two informational systems coming into a relationship is not that strange. And the old system, the more emergent system, the soul system, is, because it's going to actually merge together with the arising new psychobiological system, means it's no longer going to be able to function on that level. It's not going to be conscious. It's going to come back into something which is more primitive. But it will grow and it will emerge. And my experience, and I think a lot of people's, as you grow up, is there's some part of me, some deeper part of me that I'm dimly aware of, which is calling me or speaking to me or is unconscious in me. And I think that's the deep soul. And you start what the ancients called the daemon or the genius.
Oh yeah, you said.
And I think you start hearing this. It's like there's a part of me that's wiser than me. But I think that's the part that's been before. And my guess is that through this narrative effect, the biggest thing it's doing is it's affecting the narrative of your life. And that's where you get that feeling of, I'm being led somewhere. And I just have this intuition somewhere that I need to go and do this, or I'm just drawn to that person, or, well, the reason I met Ramesh Balsekar, because someone was reading a book in an Indian hospital, and the book was literally going boo, 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 boo. And like, what the hell? You know, all of that, I think, can often be coming from this deeper sense for who we are, which we connect with increasingly as we get older. And I think, I don't know why I had the experience when I was 12, but I suspect it was because I'd had experiences before, and that's true for many people.
So because like the inner voice that cannot be ever heard. I mean, have you ever, like, sort of Jung, isn't there an inner demon or an inner genius sort of idea? Do you think it's similar to that? Or?
Yes. In fact, Jung called it the voice, and I didn't know that, but I started calling it the voice because there was a little period in my life where I really thought, oh my God, I'm going to start channeling, because I started hearing a voice, and it was a voice, and so I just called it the voice, and it would say things to me. I don't have that now. It was only a short period, but but that's what Jung had, and I think he called it the voice. Yes.
Well, I mean, some non-dual speakers talk about having the voice of God or hearing the voice of God. I mean, I've heard a few say that. Okay. I think that's fairly rare, but just saying benign, very nice, encouraging things.
I think the key with all of that stuff for me, Dawn, is do not mistake that for authority.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's the key. Yeah. It's like, that's great, but it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. And
it's still going through your ideational network.
Yeah.
And it's not absolute. Revelation, intuition, the voice, that none of it is absolute. It's all possibly of interest. Check it out. Yeah. And when I get that, I follow it. Like, most of my philosophy comes from it. But I rigorously check it out to see if it works.
Right. So, I don't know, what do you think of the non-duality thing? Do you think it'll... There's so many people talking about it now.
It's changed a lot, don't you think?
In what way? I mean,
I'm not really in it much, so you probably know better than me.
I mean, it's very difficult to watch this stuff. It's really quite boring, isn't it? You know, it's become it's very reified, isn't it? And very just a few. I mean, I suppose I'm thinking of the radical non-duality. It's very few words. It's very, this is how it is. There's no experience. There's no me. It sounds so awful.
It's just nihilism.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so my sense generally, and you tell me whether I'm right about this, because I could well be not right, but my sense, this is just my experience, was when I used to go to non-dual events like science and non-duality conferences, there was amongst the non-dual teachers, there was quite a strong, there is no self, and it's all meaningless, and man up and get on with it. Like see the horrendous truth of your situation. That's how it always felt like, kind of very macho, kind of like, are you up to seeing how you have no free will or anything? Which always seems self-defeating, because if you've got no free will, there's no point telling anyone anything, because it won't make any difference, will it? Because they either will or won't get it. It's like it's like you can't do anything about it. So all of that. And I was out on a limb, really on my own a lot, of going, no, I still think, even when I was into the non-dual and it all in consciousness, that the individual mattered, and it was a both thing. What I find now, I've moved on from where I was, as you know, and have got this much more radical evolutionary picture. Now, it looks like that's become quite mainstream. So it's much more accepting of the individual than it was. Mm-hmm. And I often get people who come to my events or respond to my videos and things like that, and what they're putting forward, trying to say, I don't think you're right, Tim, and then what they put forward to me is what I was saying 15 years ago.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. And
it's like, oh, that's interesting. Because they've got the both and thing. Oh, it's both, isn't it? And it's like, it's all... And they're following, they're playing with where I was playing with at that point, and that feels like a progression.
So there's a catch up, you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, or just an evolution. Things evolve.
Maybe not in the radical so much, because I think
I presume not. That's still out there, is it?
Yeah, it's still there.
How big is it now?
I don't know. I mean, because the numbers have fallen. I mean, some of them still get big numbers, don't they? The ones that are a bit more professional. I don't know. But yeah, it's so dry. It's just, but like that, I've said that before. It's just amazing. Anybody could want that, but it's posed as desirable or the ultimate. It's status. It's this.
If you're suffering, especially if you're suffering with the mind,
Uh-huh.
I think it's very attractive. It's like you want to die. You want not to be there. So when someone's going, the greatest thing you can do is die, literally, to die as an individual, it's very attractive in that way. It's horrendous, actually, and what will happen is disastrous, but I understand its attraction. There's also something about the radical view, and I saw this in my attraction towards Ramesh Balsekar and Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj when I was much younger, in my 20s, 30s, was it felt like this is the real thing. And like most people, what happened to me for a very short period is I got into, I've got the real thing now. You're still into the psyche.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You're still into personal growth. You're still into, it's like, no, really, there is no self, and can't you see? And there was a real sense of this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a deep thing, and there are deep experiences to be had. So there's something in that. But it's very dismissive, and I think that's quite attractive. I found that attractive. It made me feel special. And
Yeah, for a while. But then I think later on in life it's difficult as well, because I get people who approach me for therapy and come out with things like, I know that there's no one who can help, but it's like, oh no. So it's like.
So all of that feels like there is a whole group of us now who've gone through enough of that to know what it is, but who have gone beyond it, because we're all on this evolutionary journey, and you learned a bit more, got a bit older and wiser, hopefully a bit, and then can help people unwind from that. Mm-hmm. And I know a few people who are doing this now, and I think it's great work. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully what can emerge from that is a much more human-centred, genuine spirituality, which keeps all of the depths of that, but without the slightly psychotic elements.
Okay.
Not really slightly either, really, is it? It's just psychotic.
It's quite mad, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you an idea how long we've been talking for, by the way?
No idea, but it felt like a good. Maybe we reached a place.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for watching. I'll just where's the? Here we go.